Mars, July 31st, 2008. NASA's Phoenix lander successfully touches down on the Martian surface. And while searching for evidence of microbial life, the robotic spacecraft finds trace amounts of water frozen underneath the soil. The discovery of an element so essential to life raises speculation that Mars may have been home to alien life forms in the distant past.
Now, when we start scouring the solar system for evidence of an alien species, what we're really beginning to find out is that Mars is by far the best candidate.
Given that our local solar system already has an example of 2 planets, one that clearly has life because we're here, and then one like Mars that could have had it started, and then just because it was in the wrong place or not quite right, it didn't keep going, gives hope that there really is more life elsewhere in the universe.
Mars has a special place in our consciousness and our folklore, going back to the time of really the ancient Greeks, and this becomes more important as we get closer to the end of the 19th century, where you have reliable astronomy, powerful telescopes that can see, for example, some of what are called canals on the planet Mars. People have begun to imagine a civilization that perhaps existed long ago on Mars, created these canals for transportation or for other reasons, but then something cataclysmic happened. That possibility of life on that planet was destroyed, and so the denizens had to flee and go somewhere else.
Is it possible that Mars was once a fertile planet like the Earth? And if so, might it have been home to a species of beings we call the Greys, as some ancient astronaut theorists believe?
All mythologies consider Mars to be the planet of war. So you cannot exclude that sometime in the past, this could be 10,000 or 100,000 of years ago, Mars had a civilization. And the civilization destroyed itself, whatever the reason was, and some of the winners of the situation escaped to Earth.
Our ancestors were also convinced that there was life on Mars. Mars has always been singled out as this cosmic twin of planet Earth. It's almost as if it's somehow part of our DNA that somehow tells us we need to go to Mars. And if we did have a brother at one point, the likely chance is that we're going to find evidence of this brother on Mars. Everything which we know about non-human life, contact in the past or in more recent times, it is somewhat humanoid. And so to find out that this species would have a base on Mars is, I think, very much in the line of expectations.
Any type of species on Mars today would probably be subterranean. Now, this is an interesting piece for the idea that the Greys occupy Mars. We know that here on Earth, we do see evidence of subterranean activity. Maybe the Greys actually came from Mars.
But if Mars might have once sustained life, and possibly intelligent beings, might other more distant planets in the universe also have supported life, and perhaps even a thriving civilization? December 5th, 2011. Scientists using NASA's Kepler Space Telescope confirm that they have found 2 planets orbiting a distant sun-like star that are in a narrow range of space within their solar system called the habitable zone, in which a planet might have water and perhaps sustain life.
So there's been the recent announcements of the Kepler-B and new planets, and it's been a very exciting period for astronomy. Our telescopes have gotten powerful enough to finally find planets around other suns. We have them around ours. Why would we be unique?
Kepler-22b is an example. 2.5 times the size of Earth, rotates on a 290-day orbit, very similar to our own properties here on Earth. Potentially the Greys or various other aliens that have been visiting us come from other worlds that we're now finally starting to locate.
And so what we're having here is really a threshold. Science, NASA in this case, has really made a lunge forward in saying we have left the field of possibilities. we've entered the realm whereby the ancient alien theory is no longer a theory, but is really coming closer and closer and closer to evidence, if not proof.
I think it's very possible that Kepler will find more and more planets, some Earth-like. They've already come up with a theory that there are billions of planets in our galaxy now. Some of them are bound to have intelligent life.
Las Vegas, Nevada, 1987. In the middle of the night, Brett Oldham and his girlfriend Diane Swanson are awakened by a loud bang. The couple, who are expecting their first child, are shocked to see a number of what look like gray aliens surrounding their bed.
Before we even had time to react to seeing the grays in the room, we were gone. They took us aboard the craft, they placed me on a table and placed her to my right, and they had her in a position much like women do when they get an exam from a gynecologist. I realized immediately what was happening, that they were taking the fetus.
I couldn't move. I couldn't move my head. I couldn't move anything. I could move my eyes to see, you know, where he was at, and I could hear him screaming. That's when I realized they were doing something to me. We were just calling, just saying, please, please don't take my baby, don't hurt us.
According to Diane's account, the next morning she refused to believe the incident was more than just a terrible nightmare. But after finding traces of blood in her bed, she feared a miscarriage, and the couple went to see her doctor. When examined, Diane was found to have no tissue remaining in her womb, as if the fetus had been surgically removed.
He said, I've never seen anything like this before. Well, it was like this woman was never pregnant. I went in to clean the womb, and the womb was already cleaned.
Diane had been nearly 4 months pregnant at the time of this incident.
If you're referring to a case where we have ultrasonographic evidence that the fetus was present, and then sometime later, there's no more fetus, I would think that's strange. What you have here is a ultrasonographic image of a human fetus at about 3 months of gestation. If you measure the what we call crown to rump length, which is the longest distance from the head to the butt, that's about 5 to 6 centimeters, so that's roughly the size or the diameter of a baseball. Could the body absorb this fetus overnight? That's very unlikely.
How could the unborn child just disappear completely, without a trace? Is it possible that what Brett and Diane experienced the previous night really was more than just a bizarre dream?
Most of the time, we would explain that by saying that the patient had a miscarriage. But in the event that there was not much bleeding and there's not much passage of tissue, and yet the embryo was gone, I couldn't explain that.
We were both kind of stunned when we left the hospital that night, and it took a while for us to start talking about if we remembered the same things.
3 years later, Brett Oldham claims he was once again visited and taken by gray aliens.
I was taken by 2 small grays to an area that I'd never seen before. Within a few minutes, I could see that it was a female hybrid. She was carrying a small child with her, and as she got closer, I could also see that the child she was carrying was a female hybrid. I did feel a bond with the child, which would lead me to believe that it probably was part mine.
There seems to be a good deal of relatively consistent evidence on the part of both male and female abductees that there's some interest in our reproductive process. There is also some evidence that abductees have been put in contact on spaceships with hybrid children who seem to have some human characteristics and some characteristics that aren't quite human.
Might the stories of reunions with hybrid babies be not fantasy, but a conditioning process to prepare us for the day when the alien agenda is finally revealed? But if we are being subtly and strategically altered, where will it ultimately lead?
It would seem that extraterrestrials have been coming to Earth for quite a long time and having sexual relationships with humans. And the reason for this would be to manipulate our DNA, making us into the more refined race that we are today. And we still have a certain evolution to go.
Is there another very heinous thing behind all of this? And that is, let's wipe out the Earthlings and put in this new breed that we can control.
In my personal view, we are seeing extraterrestrials interbreeding with humans as part of a long-term interfamilial exchange. The human family goes far beyond life on Earth. Extraterrestrial humans may be coming here to replenish their genetic supply. It may literally be a question of life and death for them.
When I'm asked whether an alien sexual agenda exists, or if there is anything that we can do to stop it, well, if such an agenda really exists, then I've got bad news for you. There's nothing we can do.
The Apache Sitgreaves National Forest, Arizona. November 5th, 1975. 22-year-old forestry worker Travis Walton is driving home after sundown with a group of co-workers when suddenly a strange light appears in the sky.
I noticed some little glimmers of light coming through the trees, and the light seemed to be coming from higher than where ground level would be. It was only when we got to where this light was crossing the road that we had an unobstructed view of the craft. It was a clearly visible, clearly defined metallic object, a disc hovering there, outlined against the sky. I threw open the door, thinking I'd get a closer look before it took off. As I got closer to it, the sound it was making, it was a sound you both heard and felt. And the crew said they could feel the vibration in the truck. They said it seemed like something was about to happen. And it was. That's when this energy hit me. The crew said that it was like I'd stepped on a landmine, like an explosion so violent that they thought it had killed me. When this beam of energy hit me, I felt like a physical blow, but with a sort of a tingling, sort of an electric shock sort of feeling at the same time. I don't know whether I came to soon after I was taken aboard, but I knew I was on some kind of an elevated gurney or operating table. I was looking straight into the face of this creature, and I just flipped out.
He sees these grey extraterrestrials around him, and he panics, and he begins to struggle very violently. And so those grey extraterrestrials leave that room, and then shortly afterwards, you have two human-looking extraterrestrials walking in.
In the case of these human-looking ones, I started to have serious misgivings that this was a rescue. And that's when they put this mask over my face, and I just blacked out real quickly.
Now, the suspicion here was that actually these weren't different aliens. These were the same aliens, but they were capable of shape-shifting into something else, specifically to calm him down.
Travis Walton's story has become one of the most famous alien abduction cases ever reported, and was even adapted into a movie in 1993. But if true, was he abducted by beings that are able to shapeshift and mimic humans? While Travis Walton's account is extraordinary, it is not entirely unique.
There are many stories of these abductees who see these non-human looking extraterrestrials, these greys, who then are replaced by beings that look human. And this seems to be extraterrestrials using this shape-shifting ability to make it look as though human extraterrestrials are there.
In 2013, public policy polling released data that showed 12 million Americans believe that shape-shifting beings live amongst us.
One of the most intriguing conspiracies today is that of the shape-shifting aliens. The idea that perhaps there is a class of entities on our world today that is able to represent itself as humans at will. These extraterrestrials that are hidden from the rest of the normal human society around them.
There is a theory that there are aliens among us, aliens in human form. There's an advanced guard, a fifth column, call it what you like, but the idea that perhaps as a prelude to a full-scale alien invasion, they infiltrate, they get their people into positions of power, and one could be walking right past you and you wouldn't know. People think of disclosure as being the archetypal landing on the White House lawn, spaceships in the sky. What if it's actually not that? What if aliens are already here?
While the notion that shape-shifting extraterrestrials are living among the human race may sound like something ripped from a science fiction movie, this concept was actually prevalent among people living thousands of years ago. In ancient times, nearly every culture across the globe described their gods as not only descending from the sky, but also having the ability to transform their appearance.
Shape-shifting has shown up throughout history in shamanic lore, in the great religions, the Olympians in Greece. The Hindu gods would change shape, the Egyptian gods. There's something about this idea that particularly the gods can change you to another person or become an animal.
These stories are not just here to entertain us, they are here to make sense of our relationship to the world and to the gods. And that is not a world that we have a lot of control over. And that ultimately is a terrifying thing, because when they come down to our world, in whatever shape they take, we are subject to the whims of the gods.
Washington, D.C., the National Institute of Health. Here, in 1990, scientists began the Human Genome Project to identify every gene in the human body and determine what makes up our DNA. This scientific breakthrough may allow us to manipulate human evolution and alter the human race. But is it possible, when we have become masters of human evolution, that we may finally understand the true nature of gray aliens?
When you look at the physiology of what we think the grays are, okay, large head, huge wraparound eyes, spindly body, you have to ask yourself, does this make sense in an evolutionary sense? And the answer is no, but does it make sense if these beings are bioengineered? And the answer to that is yes. That's what the grays really, I think, most realistically are.
I believe that extraterrestrials found on this planet a species that they were able to change the genetic code that would allow them to interact and secure the longevity of their species. We're the product of that. We're the genetic carrier, if you will. One of the reasons why they're still abducting us. That tweaking of the genetic code is still going on. The Greys are our space brothers. I don't think they're necessarily evil. We're an ends to a means.
Could extraterrestrials have bred with humans? You sort of need two things to have happened. One is the life form would have had to be carbon-based like us, presumably, because the chemistry has to work. The second thing is, you would need basically the same genetic type structure. So you could imagine if there was another planet with fairly similar conditions that gave carbon-based life forms, what would evolve, there is a good likelihood that you would get species like us. And if they were close enough, then of course they could interbreed with humans on Earth.
Why would they be creating a hybrid being? Is there something that's going to happen here on Earth where our genetic makeup maybe won't be able to survive some type of solar activity or something that needs to genetically modify us so that we can still survive? Is it for our own good as humans, or are they doing it for their need as aliens?
If gray aliens interbred with humans, might their biology and appearance be a reflection of their more advanced evolution as a species? And if so, might they provide a hint of what humans may look like in the distant future?
Even though the greys kind of look very different to us, you know, the larger heads, the smaller bodies, the big black eyes, in terms of evolution, you need hands, you need fingers and thumbs, you need eyes, you need ears, you need a mouth, you need to be able to communicate, because you would need that type of form to really advance yourself as a civilization.
When you're a super technologically advanced race, you don't really need big muscles. You don't really need sex organs if you're being genetically engineered, biologically and cybernetically, most likely, to function in the capacity that they do here. A super large head, for example, houses a hell of a large brain, easily their greatest asset. It's a brain that allows them to have a cognitive capacity probably vastly beyond what we're able to have. It's a brain that allows them, most likely, to have telepathic capabilities that are beyond the capability of most humans.
I tend to subscribe to the theory that we are in their image. Sounds like the book of Genesis, doesn't it? But it's very possible that ETs, who look like we do, or should I say we look like they do, came here, did a little manipulation, genetically altered what was here on the planet, created the Adam and Eve, turned it into modern man, and then left for whatever reason.
There is a missing link. The missing link is ET. They've changed our genetic code eons ago, and through a process of evolution, you have the human development to the point where we're going into space. Our evolutionary process is a direct result of genetic manipulation by ET.
But could an alien species, such as the Greys, really travel to Earth from a star system hundreds, or perhaps thousands of light years away? Or might the Greys actually be time travelers from our own future, as some ancient astronaut theorists suggest?
I think what we have is a whole shift in the imagination in the 20th and 21st century. Alien Greys are actually beings from the future who are traveling in time to the present time, which is their past. And they have evolved into this strange, hairless, grayish, bug-eyed form.
I have to wonder if they're actually interdimensional. I say this because the evidence suggests they have the ability to fold space and time with their technology.
Once we're talking about interdimensional beings, and what we're finding is that today, ancient history and future, I think, are all the same. That also explains why there are so many time anomalies happening with these events.
So it's very possible that they actually come from a distant part of our future.